Good morning, guys, and welcome back to Wake Up and Worship. All week long, we've been looking at big fish stories of the Bible. I have a challenge for you. I would love to hear from you about a big fish story that we haven't covered so far. Send in maybe a written comment or draw a picture or make a video of you telling a story from the Bible that involves fish that we haven't talked about so far on Wake Up and Worship. I love to hear from you, and I would love to hear what you learn or what you know about these fish stories. And so be sure to do that later today or tomorrow, and we will randomly choose a winner, someone who sends in a story, and we'll send you a prize. It'll be a lot of fun. Before we worship, though, today, we need another fish joke. And so our joke for today is, how does a clam get to the hospital? In a clambulance. Get it? All right. It's time to wake up and worship.
Let revolution start, let it begin with me. You're the king of my heart and you have set me free. I want to shout it out, I want the whole world to see your love. From the moment time began, you had a purpose, you had a plan. You hold my future in your hands and I believe it's true. You reached out and you rescued me. You gave me love for the world to see. In what I do and the words I speak, yeah, I belong to you. It's simply amazing the way that you save me. I want the world to know. Let revolution start, let it begin with me. You're the king of my heart and you have set
Welcome back, guys. All week long, we were looking at big fish stories in the Bible in honor of our theme about Jonah. We've learned a lot of cool things so far. If you missed the beginning, there was a challenge to you to find another fish story. And so go back and listen to that because we want to hear from you about other fish stories in the Bible. But before you can do that, you need to listen to today's fish story so that you don't accidentally send that one in. And so this story is pretty wild. It's a little bit crazy. I don't think I've ever taught it before, but I do remember learning it as a kid when I was in church. And so I'm excited to share it with you today. So Jesus and his disciples, they travel around a lot. When Jesus was doing his 3 years of earthly ministry, he was teaching and healing and telling people to turn from their sin and turn to God. So we're right in the middle of that. We're in Matthew 17. Jesus has traveled. He's with Peter, and he reaches this new place called Capernaum. And there was this rule back in Jesus' day that when you got to a new place, you were supposed to pay this temple tax. Pay money to the temple. Now, the temple is another word for church. It's like what they went to as their church. And so they're supposed to pay this temple tax. And apparently Jesus hasn't paid it yet. It says in verse 24, on their arrival in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked him, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? They come to Peter and they're like, hey, doesn't Jesus pay the tax to the temple? And Peter says, yeah, he does. And then he goes to go inside. So there's this temple tax and they need to pay it. And Jesus hasn't paid it yet, but he has a plan. He uses this moment to talk to Peter and teach him something. He says, Peter, what do you think? Should I pay this temple tax? Now, that might seem like a weird question, but do you remember what the temple is? The first temple was made back in the Old Testament. It was actually called the tabernacle, and it traveled around with the Israelites through the wilderness. It was made to be God's house. That's what the temple is. It's the house of God. God's house. You might hear church called that. And so it's supposed to be where God lives. And so should Jesus really be paying a temple tax? It's his home. He's God. And the temple is supposed to be the house of God. He shouldn't have to pay anything to go in there or any tax to it because it's there for him. It's his temple. It's his home. So it's kind of this crazy thing because you look at it and if you really think about it, Jesus doesn't need to pay the temple tax. It's his temple. It's made for him because he is God. But here's what we see. Jesus says, we don't want to offend them. We don't want to do anything wrong. Even though he really shouldn't pay the temple tax, he doesn't need to because he's God and it's his temple. He says, we don't want to offend them. We don't want to do something wrong that's so big that in their hearts they start to hate us and not trust us because they think we're doing something wrong. We don't want to offend them. And so he tells Peter, they don't have any money. They need some money to pay this tax. Here's what he tells Peter to do. He says, go down to the lake and throw in a line, a fishing line. Open the mouth of the first fish you catch, and you will find a large silver coin. Take it and pay the tax for both of us. Did you catch that? Jesus sends Peter fishing, and he says, the first fish that you find, open its mouth, and inside there will be a large silver coin, and that will be enough money for you to pay the tax for both of us. So Jesus doesn't really need to pay this tax, but he does because he needs to follow the rules, and he doesn't want to do anything that offends the collector of the temple tax because he wants them to follow him. He wants them to realize that they need to follow Jesus. They need to love God, and they need to be about what God is doing. And so he's going to pay the tax. It's the right thing to do. But he doesn't have any money. Peter doesn't have any money to pay this temple tax, and so they need help. And so Jesus does the impossible. He has Peter catch a fish that has a coin in its mouth so that the temple tax can be paid. Here's what we see from this story. There's nothing that God can't do, because remember, God is all powerful. We learned that last week. But there's nothing that he can't do, especially when it comes to the gospel or the good news of Jesus. Jesus didn't want to offend the collectors of the temple tax. He didn't want to do anything that might keep them from following God. If he broke a rule, if he he could have not paid it because it's his house. But if he did that, it could have caused a problem in the heart of the people that were supposed to be collecting the tax. And he didn't want anything bad to root into their heart because he wants their hearts to belong to God. And so he does something impossible so that these people can hear about God and nothing stands in their way of them making the choice to follow him. That means for us, really what? One, God can do the impossible. And so if you're looking at a situation and you're like, there's nothing I can do here. Peter probably felt kind of helpless. He didn't have any money and he needed to pay this tax. We learn, just like we learned from Jonah's story, that we can call out to God, we can pray, ask him for help, and he can do it. He can help us. He rescues us. He can do the impossible. We also see that Jesus is willing to do a miracle, to put a coin in a fish's mouth and have that be the first fish that Peter catches. That's wild. But Jesus is able to do this, and he is willing to do it for the sake of the gospel. He will do the impossible when it comes to people hearing about God and following him. Remember the story of the religious teachers that tell God, okay, do something amazing so we can see your power. They tell that to Jesus. And we talked about how that's not how God works. He doesn't just show off his power. He uses it so that people will follow him. And so Jesus uses his power here, the ability to do a miracle so that they can pay this temple tax. And it's not really about the money. It's about not doing anything that gets in the way of somebody choosing to follow him. So he's going to pay this tax so that it'll give him a chance to tell these people about God and that they might hear his message and choose to follow him. And so friends, I don't know where you're at today. If you're afraid to share Jesus with others, maybe you don't know what you would say, remember, God cares about people hearing his message, so much so that he'd put a coin in a fish's mouth so that nothing would get in the way of the message of Jesus going forward. The same is true for us. God will do the work. You just have to be there, show up so that he can use you. If you need help, pray and ask, and he will help. Just like he helped Peter with this fish and that has a coin in his mouth so that they can pay the tax, and these people can hear about God, and nothing will get in the way of them choosing to follow him. And so ask God when you need help to follow his plan, and he will help you. And remember, be excited, because when you're following God's plan and you're telling people about Jesus, God will show his power, and that's a pretty cool thing. It's a cool place to be because you're going to get to see it working, and he might just choose you for it to work through. And so follow his plan and ask him, pray to him when you need help. I'll see you tomorrow at 9:45.